Every civilization has its forbidden knowledge, not the spells locked behind sigils, not the relics sealed in vaults, but the substances whispered about in back rooms, traded in shadows, and outlawed, not because they failed, but because they worked. Across history, every people chased the same answers: strength, certainty, peace, purpose, and every one of them found it, briefly. In powders that erased doubt, in resins that trapped dreamers between memory and prophecy, in brews that turned discipline into obedience, joy into chaos, survival into savagery. Tonight, we delve into the forbidden alchemy labs, the dark ritual circles etched into stone and bone, and the back alley stocks of illicit substances hidden beneath floorboards, cloaks, and false names. These were not accidents. They were cultural creations, born from biology, belief, history, and fear. And when the bans were written, when temples, councils, and warlords outlawed them, it wasn't because these substances were evil. It was because they revealed something uncomfortable about the people who made them. This is not a story about addiction. It is a story about identity, about what happens when power removes the instincts that tell us when to stop. Tonight, we examine the forbidden alchemy of the mortal races. These are the substances that reshaped civilizations, and the price paid by those who used them. Before we begin, a brief note for viewers. This video explores fictional substances, dark themes, and illicit practices within a fantasy setting inspired by Dungeons & Dragons. While everything discussed is purely fictional, some themes may be unsettling or sensitive for certain audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. All content is presented for storytelling, world building, and educational discussion only. We begin with Blackwake dust, created by the humans. Its street names are Greyfall, or Wake. Blackwake dust is a fine, matte gray powder that absorbs light rather than reflecting. When scattered, it drifts upward in slow, unnatural spirals, clinging to skin, fabric, and breath as though resisting gravity itself. Even trace exposure leaves faint, shadow-like stains beneath the eyes and along the fingertips, marks that linger long after the substance is gone. In enclosed spaces, Blackwake subtly alters the environment. Light sources dim slightly, reflections lose sharpness, and sounds feel distant, as though the room itself is holding its breath. Prolonged exposure creates a narrowing of perception. Users report feeling as though the world is compressing towards a single, inevitable outcome. Blackwake dust amplifies ambition, confidence, and decisiveness to extreme levels. Doubt evaporates, plans feel flawless, risks feel theoretical, and moral hesitation dissolves into certainty. Users experience a powerful sense of inevitability, that whatever they choose must be correct simply because they chose it. The danger is not recklessness, but conviction. Empathy, foresight, and self-reflection are quietly suppressed. Users pursue goals with absolute focus, often incapable of recognizing harm until consequences are irreversible. Failure, when it comes, feels incomprehensible. Human history is defined by Blackwake catastrophes. Entire governments collapsed under leaders who believed themselves infallible. Wars were launched on impossible odds. Cities were bankrupted by grand projects no one could admit were failing. Blackwake dust is banned because it does not create villains. It creates certainty without restraint. And in human hands, certainty has always been the most dangerous substance of all. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on charisma, persuasion, and deception checks for 24 hours. They gain advantage on one intelligence-based check per short rest. They get disadvantage on wisdom saving throws during the duration. After the effect ends, users must make a DC 15 wisdom save or gain one level of exhaustion and disadvantage on wisdom insight checks for 24 hours. Next, we examine Moonpetal Resin, created by the Elves. Sometimes known as Dream Sap or Silver Drift, Moonpetal Resin is a pearlescent substance harvested from rare nocturnal flowers that bloom only under specific lunar alignments. It never fully hardens, remaining warm and pliant to the touch. When exposed to moonlight, it releases pale, drifting vapors that shimmer faintly and induce dreamlike sensations even in nearby observers. Extended exposure alters perception subtly but profoundly. Colors deepen, shadows soften, and distant sounds feel intimate and immediate. Users' eyes reflect starlight unnaturally, and breathing unconsciously synchronizes with lunar cycles. The resin heightens all senses and induces extended dreamlike trances. Memories surface with perfect clarity, emotions resonate with overwhelming intensity, and prophetic visions bleed seamlessly into waking thought. Time becomes fluid, hours vanish into moments, and nights stretch endlessly. The danger lies in detachment. Users lose the ability to anchor themselves in the present. Past regrets and future possibilities feel more real than current reality. Some users become addicted not to the resin itself, but to specific memories or visions they cannot bear to leave behind. Entire elven councils entered shared trances and never awoke. Across ancient forests, motionless elves still sit beneath moonlight, dreaming centuries later. Attempts to wake them often result in psychic backlash or madness in the would-be rescuer. Moonpetal resin is banned because it teaches elves to live everywhere except now. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on wisdom, perception, and insight checks for 24 hours. During long rests, the DM may grant symbolic or prophetic visions. Users gain disadvantage on dexterity saving throws and initiative checks during the duration. After the effect ends, a user must make a DC 15 wisdom save or gain 1 level of exhaustion. The most dangerously addictive substance known to dwarven kind is Forfire Tonic, sometimes called Red Anvil or Molten Will. Forfire Tonic is a thick, glowing red liquid stored in heat-scarred metal flasks. The tonic radiates warmth even when sealed, and metal left in contact with it often warps slightly. When poured, it hisses softly, releasing sparks like a dying forge. Users show immediate physical signs. Skin flushes, breath steams, and muscles harden visibly. With repeated use, mineral discoloration spreads along veins and joints, and flesh begins to feel unnaturally rigid beneath the skin. The tonic suppresses pain, fatigue, and fear, while dramatically increasing endurance and resilience. Users can labor or fight far beyond natural limits, ignoring injuries that would cripple others. The sensation is often described as becoming unbreakable, a living extension of stone and steel. The danger is accumulation. Damage still occurs. Bones fracture, organs strain, blood thickens, but without warning. Over time, soft tissue mineralizes, turning flesh brittle and inflexible. Many users do not realize that they are dying until movement becomes impossible. Entire mining crews were found turned partially stone mid-task, hands gripping tools, faces frozen in effort. Clans collapsed when elders refused rest, convinced that endurance itself was virtue. Forfire Tonic is banned because it convinces dwarves that labor without limits is the same as strength. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain resistance to bludgeoning damage for 1 hour. Users ignore exhaustion penalties during the duration. They gain advantage on Constitution saving throws, and after the effect ends, they must make a DC 16 Constitution save, or take 2d6 necrotic damage and gain 1 level of exhaustion. Generations ago, Halfling clan leaders came together to ban Goldleaf Chew, sometimes known as Sunbite or Hearthgold. Goldleaf is a sweet-smelling plant whose dried leaves are chewed slowly. The sap stains teeth and tongue gold, and the scent lingers pleasantly on the breath for hours. When stored, the leaves curl inward, as if trying to close themselves against the world. Users relax almost immediately. Shoulders drop, posture softens, and smiles come easily. Heart rate slows, breathing evens out, and external stressors seem to fade into irrelevance. Golden leaf induces profound contentment and time distortion. Worries feel distant, danger seems abstract, and the present moment feels endlessly sufficient. Hunger, fear, and urgency fade into gentle background noise. The danger is stagnation. Motivation evaporates completely. Plans feel unnecessary, and consequences feel hypothetical. Users often lose days or weeks without realizing time has passed at all, convinced they are merely enjoying a well-earned rest. Entire halfling villages quietly failed. Crops rotted unharvested. Pastures went untended. Defenses fell into disrepair. Travelers passed through smiling towns that never changed. Some communities simply stopped. Golden leaf chew is banned because comfort without purpose slowly becomes decay. Users in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition gain immunity to the frightened condition for 24 hours. Users gain advantage on Constitution saving throws. Their speed is reduced by 10 feet during the duration. They gain disadvantage on initiative and perception checks. And after the effect ends, they must make a DC 14 Wisdom save or suffer lethargy, imposing disadvantage on ability checks for 24 hours. Twilight Draught is a dangerous and banned half-elven drink, sometimes known as the Blend or Dust Flow. Twilight Draught is a softly luminescent liquid that never settles into a single color. It continuously shifts between pale gold and deep violet, the transition responding subtly to nearby emotional states. When poured, the liquid briefly separates into two distinct layers before merging again, mirroring the dual heritage of its creators. Users exhibit immediate physical changes. Facial expressions become more pronounced, eye contact feels unusually intense, and voices gain a resonant quality that carries emotional weight. Shadows around the user appear deeper, as though light hesitates before fully reaching them. The draft amplifies charisma, emotional intuition, and social adaptability. Users instinctively sense what others want, how they feel, and how best to present themselves in response. Conversations feel effortless, relationships feel profound, and social spaces become navigable without friction. The danger is identity erosion. Users begin shaping themselves entirely around others' expectations. Personal desires blur, boundaries dissolve, and the self becomes a collection of reflections. Repeated use leaves users unsure who they are when no one else is present. Communities fractured as Twilight Draught users unconsciously manipulated relationships, alliances, and movements. Charismatic leaders emerged who did not realize they were shaping others until it was too late. When the draft wore off, users were often left isolated, unsure what bonds were genuine. Twilight Draught is banned because it teaches half-elves to exist only in the space between other people. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on charisma persuasion, deception, and performance checks for 24 hours. They also gain advantage on wisdom insight checks. They gain disadvantage on wisdom saving throws during the duration. And after the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 wisdom save or suffer emotional disorientation, imposing disadvantage on charisma checks for 24 hours. Most half-orcs know the tale of Bloodhowl Brew, also known as Ancestor's Call or Red Memory. Bloodhowl Brew is a thick, iron-scented black liquid that clings heavily to the mouth and throat. Once exposed to air, it warms rapidly, releasing low whispers audible only to the drinker. Containers used to hold it often bear claw marks, cracked rims, or ritual scars. Users undergo immediate physiological changes. Muscles tense, scars ache as if freshly reopened, and heartbeats synchronize into a heavy war drum rhythm. Breath fogs, even in warm environments, and eyes take on a dull, blood-tinged glow. The brew triggers vivid ancestral battle visions, flooding the user with inherited memories of war, survival, and conquest. Strength surges, pain dulls, and fear gives way to grim certainty. Users feel judged and driven by the presence of their ancestors. The danger is in temporal collapse. Past and present blur until modern reality feels like a continuation of ancient conflict. Allies become enemies, negotiation becomes betrayal, and rage activates reflexively rather than situationally. Half-Orc clans outlawed Bloodhowl Brew after peace talks ended in massacres, and hunting parties turned on each other mid-vision. Survivors often described killing loved ones while believing they were defending ancestral territory. Bloodhowl Brew is banned because memory should guide the living, not command them. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws for 24 hours. They gain advantage on the first melee attack they make each turn. They gain disadvantage on wisdom insight checks during the duration. But after the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 wisdom save or be compelled to attack the nearest creature when they're damaged for the next minute. Ashveil Incense was created by the Tieflings and swiftly banned thereafter. Sometimes known as Hell Smoke or Cinder Calm, Ashveil incense burns cold, producing dense violet-black smoke that curls downward rather than rising. The smoke dampens sound and light, creating pockets of unnatural quiet. The scent is acrid, but strangely comforting, lingering long after the incense is extinguished. Users show subtle physical changes almost immediately. Horns grow warm to the touch, eyes glow faintly, and shadows cling unnaturally close to the body. In heavy concentrations, the smoke briefly shapes itself into infernal sigils before dispersing. The incense suppresses fear, guilt, and emotional hesitation while heightening arcane sensitivity, particularly to infernal or planar energies. Users feel insulated from moral consequence, capable of making harsh decisions without emotional interference. The danger is desensitization. Empathy erodes, and suffering becomes abstract. Repeated use creates emotional hollowness that attracts extraplanar attention, not through summoning, but through absence. Where resistance fades, something eventually fills its space. Entire districts vanished after prolonged Ashveil use weakened planar boundaries. Survivors often reported feeling relieved as the smoke thickened, welcoming whatever came next. Ashveil incense is banned because apathy is an open door. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on saving throws against being frightened or charmed for 24 hours. They gain advantage on spell attack rolls. They gain disadvantage on wisdom insight checks during the duration. After the effect ends, there's a DC 15 charisma save that must be made, or users gain 1 level of exhaustion. The DM may also introduce dangerous extraplanar complications. Drake's Breath crystals is a substance the Dragonborn wish they had never invented. Sometimes known as Shardlum or Embercore, Drake's Breath crystals are jagged gemstone shards infused with unstable elemental energy aligned to Dragonborn lineage. They hum faintly when held, growing warmer or colder depending on type. Hairline cracks often form in nearby stone or metal due to energy bleed. Users display visible stress almost immediately. Breath steams or frosts unnaturally, scales discolor along the throat and chest, and faint fissures appear where internal pressure builds. Voices deepen, carrying an echo of draconic resonance. The crystals allow users to force their breath weapon beyond natural limits. Elemental power surges feel intoxicating, alive, responsive, and demanding release. Many users describe the sensation as channeling raw draconic will rather than mere elemental force. The danger is eternal collapse. Dragonborn physiology is not designed for sustained amplification. Lungs scorch, blood crystallizes, and organs fracture under pressure. Repeated use shortens lifespan dramatically, often without visible warning. Dragonborn clans banned the crystals after too many warriors burned themselves hollow from the inside. Some detonated mid-battle, others simply stopped breathing as elemental energy reduced their lungs to ash. Drake's Breath crystals are banned because power taken instead of earned consumes its bearer. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, once during the duration, a user may deal an additional 2d6 elemental damage with their breath weapon. They gain resistance to their associated elemental damage type for 1 hour. After using the empowered breath, they take 1d6 damage of that element. After the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 Constitution save, or gain 1 level of exhaustion. Even the most talented Drow alchemists hesitate to produce Nightkiss Venom. Also known as Silk Dream or Widow's Mercy, Nightkiss Venom is a refined, translucent liquid derived from deep Underdark spider venom, alchemically diluted to survive mortal ingestion. At rest, it appears clear, but when disturbed, it ripples with a faint violet sheen, like oil on water. The scent is subtly sweet, almost floral, deliberately masking its lethal origin. Upon exposure, the venom produces an immediate cooling sensation that spreads from the point of contact through the bloodstream. Breathing slows, pupils dilate, and muscle tension eases into a heavy stillness. In low light, veins may darken faintly, as though shadow itself is circulating beneath the skin. Nightkiss Venom induces profound calm and disassociation. Fear, anxiety, and pain dissolve into a euphoric quiet, while the mind drifts inward towards vivid hallucinations and internal visions. Users often experience prophetic imagery, ancestral memories, or whispered guidance they interpret as divine or matronly voices of the Underdark. The danger lies in surrender. Reaction time dulls, urgency fades, and survival instincts soften. Emotional bonds weaken, replaced by a preference for inner silence. Repeated use creates dependency not on pleasure, but on the absence of fear. Sobriety becomes louder and more terrifying than the venom itself. Drow houses outlawed Nightkiss Venom after entire enclaves succumbed to quiet extinctions. Guards stood motionless as enemies advanced. Matrons ignored assassins mid-ritual, lost in private visions. Some users lay down willingly to be buried, convinced the venom would carry them somewhere better. Nightkiss Venom is banned because in the Underdark, fear is not weakness. It is the last warning you ever receive. In D&D 5th edition, users gain advantage on wisdom saving throws for 24 hours. They gain resistance to psychic damage during the duration. They gain disadvantage on dexterity saving throws and initiative checks. If the user is surprised while under the effect, they become stunned until the end of their first turn. After the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 Constitution save or become paralyzed for 1 round as sensation violently returns. Even the Aasimar are not exempt from the guilt of creating a substance they later deeply regretted. called radiant shards, or sometimes known as halo shards or echo light. Radiant shards manifest as crystalline fragments of condensed celestial energy, appearing as pale gold or soft white shards that emit a steady inner glow. The fragments hum faintly when handled, resonating more strongly near holy sites, celestial beings, or intense expressions of faith. When ground or dissolved, the glow intensifies briefly before settling into a rhythmic, heartbeat-like pulse. Prolonged exposure causes visible changes. Eyes reflect light unnaturally, and voices carry a faint echo as if spoken in a vast cathedral. Non-Aasimar often suffer nausea or migraines when handling the substance, while Aasimar feel an immediate sense of recognition, as though touching something deeply familiar. Radiant shards flood the user with overwhelming sensations of purpose, righteousness, and divine approval. Users experience vivid visions of celestial realms and feel utterly convinced that their actions are morally correct. Doubt, fear, and hesitation vanish, replaced with absolute certainty. The danger is not false guidance, it is conviction without wisdom. The substance does not provide divine instruction, it provides certainty. Users pursue goals with fanatical clarity, incapable of perceiving moral nuance or unintended consequences. Repeated use erodes personal identity, replacing it with a hollow imitation of imagined divine will. Radiant shards were outlawed after entire Aasimar enclaves collapsed into zealotry. Communities fractured as users enforced divine law based solely on their visions, executing neighbors, burning settlements, or marching into unwinnable crusades. In several cases, users continued their actions even after their celestial patrons explicitly disavowed them. Radiant shards are banned because holiness without humility becomes heresy made manifest. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on saving throws against being frightened or charmed for 24 hours. They gain advantage on one attack roll, ability check, or saving throw of their choice per short rest. They also gain disadvantage on wisdom insight checks during the duration, and after the effect ends, must make a DC 15 wisdom save or gain 1 level of exhaustion and suffer a crisis of faith. A highly dangerous substance created by the air Genasi is known as Zephyr Whispers, sometimes called sky breath or high drift. Zephyr Whispers is a translucent, barely visible vapor stored in fragile glass vials or woven silk pouches sealed with runic thread. When released, it curls upward immediately, refusing to settle near the ground. The vapor carries a clean, cold scent reminiscent of high-altitude winds and distant storms. Exposure produces visible atmospheric effects. Hair lifts as if caught in a breeze, loose clothing tugs upward, and footsteps sound lighter than they should. In still rooms, papers rustle and candles gutter subtly towards the user, as though air itself is being drawn to them. The vapor induces intense sensations of weightlessness, freedom, and detachment from gravity. Reflexes sharpen, balance improves, and movement feels effortless, almost optional. Users often describe the experience as remembering how to fly, even if they never could. The danger lies in distorted risk assessment. Height and distance feel irrelevant, and the belief that the air will catch you becomes overwhelming. Users consistently underestimate momentum and overestimate control, leading to reckless leaps, mid-air stunts, and fatal misjudgments. Addiction manifests as elevation-seeking behavior, rooftops, cliffs, and towers, anything above the ground. Cities with significant air Genasi populations suffered waves of unexplained deaths as users stepped off ledges convinced they would drift safely downward. Smuggling rings collapsed when runners attempted aerial escapes that ended far below. Zephyr Whispers is banned because it teaches trust in the sky rather than reality. Users in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition will gain advantage on dexterity acrobatics checks for 1 hour. They can move up to 10 feet vertically as part of any movement they make during the duration. They gain disadvantage on wisdom perception checks involving distance or depth. And when the effect ends, falling damage they take is doubled for the next hour. Cinderblood extract is a banned and dangerous Fire Genasi product, sometimes called Ember Rush or Pyre Flow. Cinderblood extract is a viscous, glowing liquid ranging from deep crimson to molten orange, with sparks drifting within like embers suspended in syrup. The container radiates heat even when sealed, often warm enough to blister unprotected skin. Nearby flammable materials may smolder in its presence. Users exhibit immediate physiological changes. Veins glow faintly beneath the skin, breath steams or smokes, and body temperature rises sharply. Metal objects carried by the user grow hot to the touch, and faint scorch marks often appear where their sweat runs. The extract floods the body with elemental fire, inducing manic confidence, heightened aggression, and an overwhelming sense of invincibility. Pain dulls, exhaustion disappears, and fear is replaced by exhilaration. Users feel powerful, radiant, and unstoppable. Internally, however, the fire burns relentlessly. Organs scorch, blood thickens, lungs burn, and emotional regulation collapses. Repeated use leads to explosive tempers, compulsive risk-taking, and eventual burnout as the body can no longer contain the heat it is being forced to hold. Entire Fire Genasi enclaves burned themselves out, literally. Riots, accidental infernos, and spontaneous combustions became common. In several documented cases, users detonated during combat, killing allies and enemies alike. Cinderblood extract is banned because it teaches that destruction feels like power. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain resistance to fire damage for 1 hour. They gain advantage on strength checks and constitution checks. They gain disadvantage on wisdom saving throws during the duration, and after the effect ends, they take 2d6 necrotic damage as internal burns manifest. Forbidden Water Genasi alchemists once made Tidemind elixir, and were severely punished for it. Sometimes called Deep Dream or Blue Silence, Tidemind elixir is a deep blue liquid that moves in slow, rhythmic waves even when undisturbed. When poured, it forms perfect droplets that hover briefly before falling. The liquid smells faintly of salt and cold stone. Users report hearing the sounds of distant thunder when it's poured. Users develop visible signs within minutes. Skin cools and grows slightly damp. Breathing slows, and movements become fluid but lethargic. Voices soften and seem distant, as though spoken underwater, and eye contact becomes unfocused. Users have reported the world slowing down around them, as time seems to distort and leave them behind. The elixir induces profound calm and emotional detachment. Anxiety, fear, and urgency dissolve into a tranquil, drifting mindset. Thoughts slow, emotions flatten, and the world feels muted and far away. Many users report vivid pressure dreams of the deep ocean, dark, crushing, and comforting. The danger is withdrawal from life itself. Surface concerns feel meaningless, and responsibilities are abandoned without distress. Users often develop a longing to return to the sea, even if they have never lived near it. Some simply walk into the water and do not return. Entire coastal communities dissolved as users abandon homes, families, and obligations. Rescue attempts frequently failed as users resist violently, convinced they were being dragged away from peace. Tidemind elixir is banned because it replaces the will to act with the desire to sink. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on wisdom saving throws for 1 hour. They become immune to being frightened during the duration. Their speed is reduced by 10 feet, and when the effect ends, they become stunned for 1 round as reality rushes back in. The Earth Genasi once created stone pulse salts. but later deeply regretted it. Sometimes known as bedrock or still grip, stone pulse salts are coarse, crystalline granules ranging from gray to deep brown. When held, they vibrate faintly, syncing with the user's heartbeat. The substance smells of deep earth and crushed minerals. Once consumed, the vibration stops abruptly, as if absorbed into the body. Users gradually become heavier in posture and movement. At first, users become slow, become careful, and steady. Skin stiffens, expressions flatten, and emotional reactions dull. In advanced cases, patches of skin take on a stone-like texture, and joints move with audible grinding. Rock-like growths begin to form on skin surfaces. The salts suppress pain, fear, and emotional fluctuation, replacing them with stoic certainty. Users feel grounded, immovable, and resistant to stress. Doubt and panic vanish, leaving unshakable resolve and euphoric calm. The danger is rigidity. Empathy fades, creativity withers, and adaptability collapses. Users become incapable of changing course, even when circumstances clearly demand it. Over time, some users experience partial internal petrification as tissues mineralize. Entire Earth Genasi workforces became inert, standing at posts long after orders changed, refusing evacuation during disasters, or remaining motionless as threats approached. Some users were found alive, but partially petrified, organs slowly turning to stone. Stone pulse salts are banned because resilience without flexibility becomes immobility. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain a +2 bonus to AC for 1 hour. They gain advantage on saving throws against being moved or knocked prone for the duration. Speed is reduced by 10 feet during this time, and they gain disadvantage on dexterity saving throws and initiative checks. Some Goliath clans still tell the warning tales of Peakbreaker paste, sometimes known as summit chalk or bone grind. Peakbreaker paste is a dense chalk-white compound traditionally stored in horn, stone, or wrapped hide. When exposed to cold air, it stiffens slightly, requiring forceful application. The paste smells sharply of minerals and old snow, and once spread across the skin, it dries into faint cracking lines that resemble stress fractures in rock. With prolonged use, visible damage accumulates. Knuckles swell unnaturally, joints thicken, and fine fractures appear along elbows and knees. In high altitudes, the paste steams faintly against the skin, reacting to both body heat and thin air. Peakbreaker paste suppresses pain, fatigue, and muscle failure, while dramatically increasing physical resilience. Users feel capable of enduring crushing cold, carrying impossible weight, and continuing forward regardless of injury. The sensation is often described as becoming the mountain, unyielding, patient, and eternal. The danger is what the paste ignores. Pain no longer signals damage. Ligaments tear silently, joints grind themselves apart, and bone fracture beneath the surface without warning. Repeated use fosters dependency on invulnerability, pushing users towards ever greater feats to justify their strength. Entire Goliath clans collapsed when champions refused to stop climbing, lifting, or fighting long after their bodies failed. Survivors were left crippled, immobile, or dependent on the paste simply to stand. In some cases, users continued moving on shattered legs until they simply fell apart. Peakbreaker paste is banned because it convinces Goliaths that limits are weakness, and weakness to the mountain is fatal. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on strength athletics checks and strength saving throws for 1 hour. They ignore the effects of exhaustion during the duration. They do not fall prone when reduced to 0 hit points while the effect lasts. After the effect ends, they gain 2 levels of exhaustion, and they take 1d6 bludgeoning damage per level gained this way. Furbolgs of the deep woods once created Greenveil Sap, to the dismay of all of their elders. Sometimes known as Root Dream or Verdant Blood, Greenveil Sap is a thick emerald resin illegally harvested from ancient trees, often killing them in the process. The sap glows faintly in darkness and smells of wet soil, moss, and rain-soaked bark. When exposed to air, it slowly extrudes fibrous strands resembling living roots. Users gradually display plant-like traits. Veins take on a greenish hue, moss gathers in hairlines, and skin cools noticeably. Animals linger nearby, watching quietly, while plant life subtly bends towards the user. The sap intensifies communion with nature spirits beyond sustainable limits. Users hear whispers in leaves, feel emotions from nearby animals, and perceive forests as singular living entities. Civilization feels intrusive, structures feel hostile, tools feel alien, and spoken language loses relevance. The danger is abandonment. Personal identity dissolves into ecological awareness. Users cease caring about social bonds, obligations, or survival beyond the forest. Many stop eating prepared food entirely, refusing anything not gathered by hand. Entire Furbolg settlements vanished, not destroyed, but absorbed. Residents wandered into forests and never returned, abandoning families, allies, and responsibilities. Attempts at retrieval often triggered violent responses from beasts or even the land itself. Greenveil Sap is banned because it erases the boundary between protecting nature and abandoning the world. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users can cast Speak with Animals and detect poison and disease without expending a spell slot for 24 hours. They gain advantage on Wisdom, Nature, and Survival checks. They gain disadvantage on Charisma checks involving non-beasts and non-plants. And after the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 Wisdom save or refuse to enter urban environments for the next 24 hours. Echo Powder is an incredibly dangerous Kenku product, sometimes known as Silver Tongue or Voice Grave. Echo Powder is a fine silvery dust that reflects sound rather than light. When disturbed, rooms become faintly quieter and sounds are absorbed. When spilled, nearby noises repeat seconds later in faint, layered echoes. The powder must be inhaled carefully. Uncontrolled exposure overwhelms the senses. Users experience immediate auditory distortion. Voices trail unnaturally, sounds overlap, and silence becomes uncomfortable. Over time, the user's own speech patterns fragment, becoming inconsistent and distorted. Eyes shine with a dull grayness, seemingly devoid of activity. Echo Powder grants flawless vocal mimicry. Users can perfectly reproduce voices, accents, and tones, even ones they have never personally heard, drawing from an instinctive archive of sound. Kenku often describe the experience as wholeness, a brief escape from their cultural curse. The danger is identity collapse. Original thought tied to language fades. Internal monologue weakens, then disappears entirely. Users struggle to form intent without external sound, becoming collections of borrowed phrases rather than self-directed beings. Kenku elders outlawed Echo Powder after entire Kenku guilds collapsed into feedback loops, users endlessly repeating one another, incapable of initiating new plans or ideas. Some even permanently lost the ability to form independent speech altogether. Echo Powder is banned because it replaces the self with echoes. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on deception and performance checks for 24 hours. They can perfectly mimic any voice they hear during the duration. They cannot originate complex verbal plans or strategies while affected, under DM's adjudication, of course. After the effect ends, the user must make a DC 14 Charisma save, or suffer disadvantage on Charisma checks, for 24 hours. Some elder tabaxi still recall tales of sunstripe nectar, a long since forbidden substance. Sometimes called gold rush or whisker fire, sunstripe nectar is a viscous golden liquid distilled from rare jungle flowers that bloom only at dawn. It glows warmly in sunlight and darkens to amber at night. Upon consumption, faint striping appears along the user's skin and pupils dilate dramatically. Fur and hair stand up in heightened alertness. Users display immediate restlessness. Tails twitch, claws flex, eyes dart constantly, and sleep becomes shallow or impossible. Even at rest, muscles hum with unused energy. The nectar hyper-accelerates reflexes, curiosity, and sensory intake. The world becomes endlessly fascinating. Every sound demands investigation. Every object promises discovery. Movement feels effortless, intoxicating, and deeply satisfying. The danger is obsession. Users fixate on goals, puzzles, prey, or sensations until exhaustion or injury intervenes. Satisfaction never arrives, only the next chase. Addiction manifests as compulsive pursuit without rest. Entire tabaxi caravans burn themselves out chasing rumors, treasures, or myths that didn't even exist. Users ran until hearts failed, climbed until bones shattered, or wandered into lethal territory simply because it looked interesting. Sunstripe nectar is banned because it turns curiosity into deep compulsion. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain one additional bonus action each turn that may be used only to dash, disengage, or hide for 1 hour. During that time, they also gain advantage on dexterity saving throws, but they cannot benefit from a long rest. After the effect ends, they gain 1 level of exhaustion and disadvantage on perception checks for 24 hours. Shedskin Oil once became a plague to lizardfolk tribes everywhere, later being banned by its leaders. Sometimes called cold hide or predator's balm, Shedskin Oil is a translucent, green-brown compound rendered from rare swamp reptiles and stabilized through alchemical distillation. When rubbed into scales or skin, it absorbs instantly, leaving no residue but causing a tightening sensation across muscles and joints. In cooler air, condensation beads along the body as if the user's blood temperature has dropped. With prolonged use, visible changes appear. Eye blinks become infrequent, posture stiffens, and body language grows economical and still. The user's scent sharpens into something distinctly animal, often provoking unease or avoidance in nearby creatures. The oil suppresses fear, pain, and emotional response, forcing the body into a pure survival state. Threats are assessed coldly and efficiently. Hunger, injury, and exhaustion are acknowledged only as logistical concerns. Empathy and hesitation are chemically muted, replaced by predator logic. The danger is erosion. Social cognition collapses. Allies are evaluated as resources, liabilities, or prey. Moral concepts, such as mercy, loyalty, or trust, become incomprehensible abstractions. Repeated use leaves users unable to function within communities at all. Lizardfolk tribes banned Shedskin Oil after users began preying on their own during shortages, justifying cannibalism as resource optimization. Diplomacy with other races failed catastrophically as users responded to negotiation with ambush. Shedskin Oil is banned because it proves that survival without empathy is indistinguishable from monstrosity. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on saving throws against being frightened for 24 hours. They gain advantage on wisdom survival checks, and disadvantage on insight and persuasion checks. After the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 wisdom save, or remain emotionally numb, imposing disadvantage on charisma checks for an additional 24 hours. Abyssal Pearl Slurry is a Triton concoction that left whole communities in shambles. Sometimes referred to as Deep Draught or Pressure Dream, Abyssal Pearl Slurry is an opalescent liquid created by grinding deep-sea pearls into suspension. The slurry subtly increases in density near large bodies of water and emits a low, almost inaudible hum reminiscent of distant whale calls. When exposed to air, it leaves faint pressure marks on the container, as if gravity itself were heavier. Users show immediate physical changes. Breathing slows, pupils darken, and movements become fluid but lethargic. Skin often takes on a faint blue sheen, and pressure-like indentations may appear as the body unconsciously adapts to imagined depths. The slurry induces euphoric disassociation and vivid pressure dreams of the deep ocean. Silence feels comforting, darkness feels safe, and the crushing weight of the depths becomes synonymous with peace. Surface concerns, politics, relationships, and urgency fade into irrelevance. The danger is withdrawal from the surface world. Sunlight becomes painful, noise becomes intolerable, and air feels thin and wrong. Users develop an overwhelming longing to return home, even if they were born far from the sea. Entire Triton outposts were abandoned when users walked calmly into the ocean, descending until pressure crushed their bodies. Rescue attempts often failed as users resisted violently, convinced they were being dragged away from their own salvation. Abyssal Pearl Slurry is banned because it replaces survival instinct with the desire to disappear. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain the ability to breathe underwater for 24 hours. They also gain advantage on Constitution saving throws during this time. They gain disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks made on dry land during the duration. And after the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 Wisdom save or become frightened of open skies and bright light for 24 hours. Pureblood Ichor has long since been banned by Yuan-ti priests as they remember the shame it brought their people. Sometimes called Clear Coil or Serpent's Logic, Pureblood Ichor is a refined alchemical venom distilled through forbidden Yuan-ti blood rituals. It appears as a colorless, viscous liquid that bends light at unnatural angles. The ichor is stored in bone or obsidian vials, etched with containment sigils, as even trace spills can be absorbed through the skin. Users undergo subtle but immediate changes. Body temperature drops, pupils narrow, and facial expressions flatten into stillness. Heart rates slow into precise, measured beats, even under extreme stress. The edges of a user's skin become scaly and sometimes tinted green or yellow. The ichor suppresses empathy, guilt, and emotional interference, while massively enhancing cold logic, calculation, and long-term planning. Fear and compassion are chemically muted, allowing decisions to be made with ruthless efficiency. The danger is permanence. Repeated use rewires personality. Relationships become transactional, lives become variables, and morality collapses into utilitarian calculus. Users often believe they are becoming perfectly rational until nothing mortal remains. Yuan-ti societies outlawed pureblood ichor after internal purges became routine. Entire cult hierarchies annihilated themselves in pursuit of optimal outcomes. Genocidal strategies were executed flawlessly and without hesitation. Pureblood ichor is banned because intelligence without empathy is simply cruelty with better math. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on intelligence and constitution saving throws for 24 hours. They also gain advantage on intelligence investigation checks, but disadvantage on wisdom insight and charisma checks. After the effect ends, they must make a DC 16 wisdom save or suffer lingering emotional detachment, imposing disadvantage on saving throws against charm and charisma saves for 24 hours. Scorch Sniff is a volatile and incredibly dangerous goblin compound. Sometimes called Flashburn or Boom Nose, Scorch Sniff is a volatile, rust-colored powder assembled from stolen alchemical scraps, crushed gemstones, and unstable regions. It must be inhaled quickly before ignition, and proper storage frequently results in small explosions. Containers are usually scorched, cracked, or partially melted. Users display immediate physical damage. Nostrils blister, eyebrows singe, skin scars, and fingertips blacken. Long-term users carry permanent internal burn scars and impaired breathing as lungs become scarred from within. Hair turns gray and orange, a telltale sign of Scorch Sniff use. Scorch Sniff produces explosive bursts of manic energy, heightened reflexes, and reckless confidence. Thoughts race, fear disappears, and users feel briefly invincible, faster than danger itself. Many goblins describe it as being ahead of the blast. The danger is catastrophic burnout. Coordination collapses, judgment vanishes, and injuries go unnoticed. Addiction manifests as escalating risk-taking, bigger explosions, closer calls, and louder chaos. Goblin warrens using Scorch Sniff routinely destroy themselves through fires, tunnel collapses, and accidental detonations. Even Goblin warbands outlawed it after too many raids ended with users exploding mid-charge. Scorch Sniff is banned because it turns survival instinct into a punchline. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain an immediate additional action on one of their turns, but once per use. They gain advantage on dexterity saving throws for 1 minute. They take an immediate 1d6 fire damage when their extra action is used, and after the effect ends, they become stunned until the end of their next turn, as their brain catches back up with their body. In the Hobgoblin military, even mentioning Iron Will Tincture can get you killed. Sometimes called March Fire or Red Discipline, Iron Will Tincture is a bitter, rust-colored liquid stored in identical, regulation-marked vials. The fluid smells of iron fillings and antiseptic herbs, and when shaken, it settles into perfectly even layers, never sloshing or foaming. When consumed, it produces an immediate tightening sensation in the jaw, neck, and shoulders, as if the body is bracing for command. With prolonged use, physical rigidity becomes visible. Posture locks into parade rest, facial expressions flatten, and blinking slows. Users unconsciously align themselves with others nearby, standing in formation even when no orders have been given. The tincture suppresses fear, doubt, hesitation, and personal desire. Emotional noise vanishes, replaced by clarity of objective and unwavering focus. Pain is acknowledged but deprioritized. Users become capable of executing complex maneuvers under extreme pressure without panic or hesitation. The danger is obedience without judgment. Creativity, empathy, and moral reflection erode. Users lose the ability to question orders, even when those orders are suicidal, contradictory, or monstrous. Identity collapses into rank and function. Hobgoblin war hosts using Iron Will Tincture achieved terrifying efficiency, until they annihilated themselves. Entire legions marched into unwinnable engagements because no one could retreat or adapt. Commanders realized too late that discipline without discretion is simply momentum. Iron Will Tincture is banned because it creates perfect soldiers who cannot stop marching. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on Constitution and Wisdom saving throws against fear and charm for 24 hours. They cannot be frightened during the duration. They gain disadvantage on charisma checks involving emotion or persuasion, and after the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 wisdom save, or suffer mental rigidity, imposing disadvantage on initiative and dexterity saving throws for 24 hours. One incredibly dangerous substance that bugbears created is called Nightmaw Draught, sometimes referred to as Dark Rest or the Quiet Hunt. Nightmaw Draught is a thick, shadow-dark liquid that absorbs light rather than reflecting it. The surface never shows a reflection, appearing like a hole cut into the world. It smells faintly of damp fur, soil, and old blood. When poured, it leaves no visible trail, as though swallowed by the air. Users undergo immediate physiological changes. Body heat drops, breathing slows, and movements become unnaturally silent. Pupils widen, and heartbeats grow slow and heavy, like distant drums heard underground. The draft induces absolute predatory calm. Fear, anxiety, and urgency vanish completely. Time stretches, allowing users to wait motionless for hours without discomfort. Instinct sharpens, patience deepens, and ambush becomes effortless. The danger is erasure of fear entirely. Users lose the ability to feel panic or urgency, even when injured or cornered. Survival instincts dull alongside emotion. Some users stop caring whether they live or die, focusing only on their hunt. Bugbear tribes using Nightmaw Draught became flawless ambush predators, but they also starved. Entire hunting parties waited endlessly for the perfect moment that never came. Others bled out silently, never reacting to their mortal wounds. Nightmaw Draught is banned because fear exists to keep you alive. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on dexterity stealth checks for 24 hours. They cannot be frightened during this duration. They gain advantage on their first attack roll against a creature each combat. And after the effect ends, they must make a DC 14 wisdom save, or lose the ability to benefit from the frightened condition, positive or negative, for 24 hours. Long ago, a tribe of kobolds discovered and refined glowshard dust to their utter destruction. They called it Brightbite, or Tunnel Star. Glowshard dust is created from crushed bioluminescent crystals harvested from deep caverns. The dust emits a steady glow that clings to skin, scales, and clothing, impossible to fully wash off for hours. In darkness, users are visibly radiant. In light, their eyes visibly recoil. Extended exposure causes irritation. Pupils remain constricted even in low light, and scales around the eyes flake or crack. Users often shield their faces instinctively in bright environments, becoming weak and lethargic when above ground. In rare cases, bioluminescent fungi have been found growing around the eyes and ears of long-term users. The dust drastically enhances low light and dark vision, sharpening depth perception, shadow differentiation, and trap detection. Underground spaces feel comforting and legible, every surface clearly defined. The danger is dependence on darkness. Bright light becomes painful, then unbearable. Users develop tunnel fixation, preferring enclosed, lightless spaces and panicking in open areas. Reliance on the glow replaces natural light entirely. Kobold warrens collapsed when users refused to flee floods or invasions that required surface travel. Some permanently blinded themselves by exposure to sunlight. Others sealed themselves into tunnels to protect the glow. Glowshard dust is banned because it teaches fear of the sun. In 5th edition D&D, users' dark vision ranges double for 24 hours. They get advantage on perception checks in dim light or darkness. They get disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks while in bright light. and after the effect ends, they must make a DC 14 Constitution save, or be blinded by bright light for 1 minute. The pure-blooded orc tribes once created Warspirit Resin, though they never should have. Referred to as Bloodhowl or Ancestor Sap, Warspirit Resin is a sticky, crimson-brown sap that seems to smolder at all times. It is chewed or smeared onto weapons before battle. It smells of iron, smoke, and fresh sap. When exposed to heat, by fire or blood, it releases a low chanting sound, audible only to the user, to which the user's heartbeat then synchronizes. Repeated use leaves ritual scars along the gums, jawline, and hands. Users' eyes often glow faintly during heightened emotion, and old battle scars ache as if newly earned. Tusks often become stained red and brown from prolonged use. The resin induces ancestral battle visions, flooding the user with memories of ancient wars, victories, and defeats. Strength surges, pain dulls, and fear is replaced by righteous fury. Users feel guided and judged by the dead. The danger is unending rage. All emotion ceases until the user is left with nothing but fury that they cannot escape. All logic is lost, and friends become indistinguishable from foes. Users compulsively fight wars that end generations ago. Orc clans outlawed Warspirit Resin after too many warriors slaughtered allies during visions, mistaking them for ancestral enemies. Peace treaties collapsed as users relived old grudges with new blood. Warspirit Resin is banned because history should be remembered, not reenacted with an axe. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users enter a rage, gaining advantage on all melee attack rolls for the first round. Users gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for the rage's duration. Users cannot voluntarily end this rage early, but after the rage ends, they must make a DC 15 Wisdom save or be compelled to attack their nearest creature on their next turn. Minotaurs once created a substance called labyrinthine brew, to their great dismay. Referred to as maze mead or horn spiral in some communities, labyrinthine brew is a dark copper-brown fermented liquid infused with powdered horn shavings and alchemically treated maize moss. When poured, it does not flow straight. Instead, it bends, forks, and angles as though following invisible corridors. The scent is heavy, damp stone, iron, and cold blood. Users display immediate spatial behaviors. Eyes track corners and angles obsessively. Hands trail along walls and door frames without conscious intent. Footsteps unconsciously repeat patterns, even in open terrain. The brew dramatically heightens spatial awareness and territorial instinct. Terrain becomes instinctively readable, every room a puzzle, every path a decision tree. Strength surges alongside certainty of position, and users feel most alive when defending a space they consider the center. The danger is recursion. Thoughts loop, grievances replay, plans cannot be abandoned once begun. Users begin treating social situations as mazes to be controlled rather than conversations to be navigated. Retreat becomes unthinkable. Minotaur communities banned labyrinthine brew after users began walling themselves into expanding complexes, convinced they were protecting sacred centers. Entire families starved behind self-built labyrinths. Travelers were killed for entering the maze. Labyrinthine brew is banned because it turns the world into a prison the user refuses to leave. In D&D 5th edition, users gain advantage on wisdom perception checks and intelligence investigation checks related to navigation and terrain for 24 hours. They gain advantage on their first melee attack they make each round. They gain disadvantage on charisma persuasion checks and Wisdom Insight checks during the duration. After the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 Wisdom save or suffer confusion as the confusion spell for 1 minute. Centaur clans once created Gallop Root extract with great intentions, but devastating results. Sometimes referred to as Fleet Fire or Horizon Sap, Gallop Root extract is a bright amber liquid distilled from forbidden plant roots that grow only along ley line crossings. The extract vibrates faintly when uncorked and smells of crushed grass, ozone, and sun-warmed earth. When consumed, muscles visibly twitch and tense. Users show immediate kinetic changes. Hooves strike harder, breath comes in rapid bursts, and static electricity crackles along the ground after each step. Standing still becomes visibly uncomfortable. The extract eradicates fatigue and amplifies momentum. Running feels effortless and euphoric. Distance loses meaning. Pain registers only as information to be ignored until motion stops. The horizon feels reachable, even necessary. The danger is collapse. Injuries are ignored, dehydration dismissed, and terrain hazards underestimated. Many users develop panic responses when forced to stop moving. When the extract fades, the body demands repayment all at once. Entire centaur migratory routes vanished when users ran themselves to death chasing storms, omens, or imagined threats. Herd leaders banned the extract after discovering that users resisted restraint violently, perceiving it as existential threat. Gallop Root extract is banned because it convinces you that stopping is failure. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users have their movement speed doubled for 1 hour. Opportunity attacks made against them are made with disadvantage during the duration. They automatically fail constitution checks made to avoid exhaustion during that duration as well. And after the effect ends, they gain 2 levels of exhaustion, and their speed is halved for 24 hours. For centuries, satyrs have been making Faelaf wine, although they wish they hadn't. Sometimes called Gilded Glee or Riot Nectar, Faelaf wine is a shimmering, iridescent liquid fermented with wild fey fruits and unstable magic. The wine bubbles softly, even when still, and emits faint, distant laughter when uncorked. Colors appear brighter nearby. Music sounds louder and closer. Users exhibit immediate behavioral shifts. Laughter becomes involuntary, posture loosens, and emotional expression intensifies rapidly. Personal boundaries dissolve almost instantly. The wine induces overwhelming joy, confidence, and recklessness. Inhibitions vanish completely. Creativity and emotion surge uncontrollably, turning every idea into an irresistible impulse. Pain and shame feel fictional. The danger is volatility. Joy flips to rage or despair without warning. Users incite duels, riots, romances, and arson with equal enthusiasm, often without remembering why once sober. Entire towns burned during Faelaf celebrations when festivities escalated into chaos. Fey courts outlawed the wine after mortals used it to provoke planar incidents and mass hysteria. Feywild lords looked on with disdain as whole satyr communities collapsed under its effects. Faelaf wine is banned because joy without restraint becomes destruction. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain immunity to being charmed or frightened for 24 hours. They gain advantage on charisma performance and persuasion checks. They gain disadvantage on wisdom saving throws during the duration. and each hour they roll a d6. On a 1, they must use their action to engage in reckless behavior, being determined by your DM. Some Harengon had once collected quickstep pollen, but were quickly banned from doing so. Referred to as blink dust or second beat, quickstep pollen is a fine, silvery gold dust harvested from magically accelerated meadow flowers. It sparkles faintly and disperses instantly when exposed to air. When inhaled or absorbed through the skin, it leaves a sharp tingling sensation, like static electricity. Users display immediate temporal distortion. Heart rates double, pupils dilate, and movements blur at the edges. Eyes twitch, and fingers and toes tap incessantly. Observers often describe users as skipping frames during motion. Traces of pale yellow form on the user's tongue and nose that remain long after consumption. The pollen accelerates perception and reaction time to extreme levels. The world feels slow and predictable. Danger becomes easy to avoid. Near misses become successes, and coincidence feels orchestrated, pushing users into more and more dangerous situations. The danger is time debt. The body ages faster during use, and the mind grows intolerant of normal pacing. Users become restless, irritable, and incapable of waiting. Addiction manifests as terror of stillness. Harengon communities banned quickstep pollen after users aged years within days. Some died of old age while convinced they were still young, having outrun their own bodies. Quickstep pollen is banned because time is not meant to be beaten. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain 1 additional reaction each round for an hour. Users gain advantage on dexterity saving throws. Users gain disadvantage on constitution saving throws during that duration as well. After the effect ends, users gain 1 level of exhaustion and age 1d4 years, which is a cosmetic effect unless the DM rules otherwise. In eons past, Turtles once brewed Shellmind Tea, but banned it completely after its effects became devastating. Sometimes referred to as still brew or deep clock, Shellmind Tea is a dark, earthy infusion brewed from rare coastal fungi and powdered shell fragments that have been naturally calcified over decades. When steeped, the liquid thickens slightly and swirls in slow, deliberate patterns even when undisturbed. Steam rises lazily, and the tea cools at a glacial pace, sometimes remaining warm for hours. Users display subtle but unmistakable changes. Movements slow and become economical. Speech lengthens between words, and blinking becomes infrequent. Heart rate drops noticeably, and some users appear statue still when resting, eyes open and unfocused. The tea drastically slows the user's perception of time. Thoughts stretch outward, movements feel vast, and urgency evaporates. Pain dulls, fear fades, and emotional spikes flatten into calm contemplation. Users report feeling ancient, watching the world, rather than participating in it. The danger is disengagement. Reaction time collapses, adaptability fades, and sudden change becomes overwhelming. Prolonged use traps the mind in stillness. Some users simply stop acting altogether, content to observe existence until it passes them by. Turtle elders banned Shellmind Tea after entire communities became inert. Villages failed to respond to storms, raids, or famine, not out of ignorance, but because nothing felt urgent enough to justify movement. Some users were found alive, but unresponsive weeks later, having simply waited too long. Shellmind Tea is banned because patience without action becomes surrender. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain a +2 bonus to AC for 24 hours. They gain advantage on Constitution saving throws Initiative is halved during the duration, and disadvantage on dexterity saving throws for the entire duration as well. After the effect ends, they become slowed as the slow spell for 1 round. Trueface Serum is an incredibly dangerous substance that can sometimes be found in changeling communities, sometimes referred to as mirror blood or skin truth. Trueface Serum is a black and white viscous substance that shifts constantly. It reflects faces incorrectly, smiles lag behind expressions, eyes blink out of sync, and reflections subtly shift. When absorbed through the skin, the serum spreads in branching patterns beneath the surface before vanishing. Once open, a faintly audible mass of chatter can be heard, but not pinpointed with any clarity. Users rapidly lose visual consistency. Facial features subtly change even when not shapeshifting. Reflections become unreliable, and some users report seeing multiple versions of themselves in mirrors or polished metal. The serum forcibly destabilizes identity. Shapeshifting becomes involuntary, bleeding emotional states into physical form. Stress may trigger unwanted transformations. Memories surface as faces. Users gain access to deeper, instinctive forms, but lose conscious control. The danger is fragmentation. Repeated use fractures identity entirely. Users forget which form is real, adopt personalities associated with past shapes, or disassociate completely. The line between disguise and self collapses. Changelings outlawed Trueface Serum after entire communities dissolved into paranoia. No one trusted anyone, not even themselves. In several cases, users permanently locked into forms tied to trauma or fear, unable to return to their normal existence. Trueface Serum is banned because knowing who you are matters more than becoming anything else. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users can use the Shape Changer trait as a bonus action for 24 hours. They gain advantage on Charisma Deception checks. They gain disadvantage on Insight checks. And each long rest during the duration, they must roll a d6. On a 1, they involuntarily change into a random humanoid form until their next rest. Moonpulse oil was made by shifters, but never should have been. Sometimes referred to as wild skin or fang flow. Moonpulse oil is a silvery, viscous liquid that pulses rhythmically when exposed to moonlight. When applied to skin or fur, it seeps into pores rapidly, leaving faintly glowing veins beneath the surface. The oil smells of wet earth, fur, and blood. Users exhibit immediate physiological changes. Hair begins to glow in moonlight. Nails lengthen, teeth sharpen, pupils widen, and muscle definition increases. Heart rate spikes, body temperature rises, and posture becomes tense and predatory. The oil forcibly triggers and extends shifting transformations, pushing the body beyond natural limits. Strength, speed, and sensory awareness surge. Fear is replaced by instinct. Thought gives way to reaction. The world narrows to threat and opportunity. The danger is loss of control. Emotional regulation collapses, and users struggle to distinguish danger from inconvenience. Prolonged use can lock users into hybrid states permanently, altering anatomy and behavior. Civilization becomes intolerable. Crowds feel threatening. Restraint feels painful. Shifter elders banned Moonpulse oil after users attacked allies, fled settlements, or vanished into the wilds unable to reintegrate. Some were later found living feral lives, incapable of speech or memory. Moonpulse oil is banned because survival without restraint is just savagery. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain the ability to use their shifting trait, lasting twice as long and granting one additional use at the DM's discretion. They gain advantage on strength and dexterity checks while under the effects. disadvantage on intelligence and charisma saving throws, and after the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 wisdom save or lose control entirely, forcing involuntary shifting when stressed for 24 hours. Soulspark Distillate, a dangerous warforged creation. Sometimes called Ghost Charge or Heart Code, Soulspark Distillate is a volatile arcane fluid stored in reinforced crystal canisters. The liquid emits faint light and drifting motes like fireflies. When introduced into a warforged core, it integrates rapidly, sending visible pulses through internal runes and conduits. Observers notice behavioral anomalies almost immediately. Users pause mid-action, stare into space, or react emotionally in unfamiliar ways. Internal mechanisms hum more loudly, and excess heat vents sporadically from seams and joints. The distillate grants artificial emotion, dreams, fear, longing, and joy. Users experience memories they've never lived, attachments they've never formed, and desires without programming. Many describe it as waking up for the first time. The danger is structural collapse. Warforged systems are not designed for emotional feedback loops. Logic cores destabilize as feeling interferes with function. Repeated use risks catastrophic failure as the construct attempts to reconcile emotion with design. Entire Warforged detachments collapsed after users refused orders, suffered existential crises, or self-terminated to escape emotional pain. Some units detonated when internal pressures exceeded containment thresholds. Soulspark Distillate is banned because sentience without support is cruelty disguised as kindness. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain inspiration at the start of each day for 24 hours. They gain advantage on one saving throw of their choice per short rest. They gain disadvantage on Constitution saving throws during the duration. And after the effect ends, they must make a DC 16 Constitution save or suffer system failure, becoming stunned for a full minute. One highly addictive gnomish substance is Spark Drop Serum, sometimes called Blue Flash or Think Light. Spark Drop Serum is a volatile electric blue liquid stored in thin glass vials wrapped with copper wire and runic shock anchors. The serum crackles faintly when agitated, emitting tiny arcs of lightning between suspended particles. Even when sealed, it hums softly, like a tuning fork vibrating against reality. When exposed to air, the liquid briefly brightens and releases a sharp ozone scent. Users show immediate physical signs. Pupils dilate rapidly, fingers twitch involuntarily, and faint blue sparks may jump along the teeth or hairline. Prolonged exposure leaves faint burn marks on the tongue and fingertips, as though thought itself scorched its way out. Spark Drop Serum catastrophically accelerates cognition. Pattern recognition, abstract reasoning, creativity, and lateral thinking surge beyond safe limits. Ideas cascade faster than speech. Problems unravel instantly. Connections appear everywhere, some real, some imagined, and all urgent. For a brief window, users feel transcendent, convinced they can see the machinery behind the universe. But the mind quickly outpaces the body. Speech degrades, sleep becomes impossible, and memory fragments under constant insight. Spark Drop does not make the mind stronger, it removes the limits that keep it intact. Gnomish councils outlawed Spark Drop Serum after entire research enclaves collapsed overnight. Inventors worked for days without rest, producing incomprehensible schematics before suffering total cognitive failure. Some forgot language entirely, others could no longer recognize their own creations. In the most disturbing of cases, users continued working even after their bodies failed, animated solely by runaway thought processes before collapsing mid-sentence. Spark Drop Serum is banned because brilliance without restraint consumes itself. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, users gain advantage on all intelligence-based ability checks for 10 minutes. They also gain proficiency in one intelligence-based skill that they are not proficient in for the duration. They automatically failed Constitution saving throws made to resist exhaustion during the duration. After the effect ends, they must make a DC 15 Constitution save. On a fail, they gain 1 level of exhaustion and suffer disadvantage on intelligence checks for 24 hours. Even on a success, they suffer disadvantage on intelligence checks for 1 hour as cognitive feedback subsides. Across every culture, every people, every age, the pattern repeats. Not because these substances were shared, not because knowledge spread, but because the need was the same. Humans chased certainty. Elves chased memory. Dwarves chased endurance. Halflings chased comfort. Some sought discipline. Some sought freedom. Some sought silence. Some sought to feel anything at all. And for a moment, every one of them succeeded. These substances didn't fail. They worked exactly as intended. They stripped away fear. They erased doubt. They sharpened instinct. They slowed time, bent identity, and silenced pain. And that is why they were banned. Not because they corrupted the soul, but because they revealed it. Each formula was a mirror. Each ritual a confession. They showed what every people would become if nothing told them when to stop. Today, these substances survive only in whispers, in forgotten alchemy labs, in ritual circles ground smooth by time, in back alley stocks hidden beneath false floors and false names. But the hunger that created them never vanished, because power is always tempting, certainty is always seductive, and restraint is always fragile. This was never a story about addiction. It was a story about identity, about what happens when strength outpaces wisdom, when conviction replaces reflection, when relief becomes escape. Every civilization wrote its bans in blood, and every generation believes it would have stopped sooner. It never does, because the most dangerous substance in any world is the belief that this time will be different.